Hello everyone, welcome back to the Daily Knitter Podcast. My name is Tiffany. In today's video, I'm mainly going to be focusing on my one finished object, and that is my Ingrid sweater in the junior size. So I'm going to go into all the details of why I decided to knit a junior size versus the regular women's size, the construction of the sweater. I'm going to talk about all the different sections, some of the pros and cons to the pattern, and kind of take you through the entire process of knitting this sweater. And the reason I'm going to go more in depth into this project versus some of my other projects is because I honestly didn't see a ton of in-depth videos of people talking about their experience knitting the sweater. There were a few podcasters who I saw who have knitted the sweater and shared some of their thoughts and stuff, but I didn't find it to be super in detail, and I don't know, I just thought it was a little difficult because there were some sections where I really had questions on, and it didn't seem like there were a lot of resources out there answering those questions. So in this video, I'm going to try to do that in case you are knitting the Ingrid sweater and had some questions or difficulties and we're looking for some answers. So that is going to be the bulk of today's episode. As always, I will have sections linked down below in case you're interested in, skipping ahead and looking at my whips and acquisitions and things like that. But without further ado, let's get into it. Like I mentioned, I decided to knit the Ingrid Sweater Junior, and I actually knitted it in the size meant for 8 to 9-year-olds. And I'm going to talk about why in a second. But first, I do need to talk about the yarn. For some reason on camera, it's showing up as a little more orange, I think. Maybe if I hold it up, it's a little closer to a red. It's a pretty true red in person. There's maybe like a tiny hint of orange, but when I look at it in person, to me, it screams like bright red. And the yarn I used is Sandisgarn Double Sunday in Scarlet Red. I purchased it at my local yarn shop, Mother Knitter, which I actually recently found out is the North American distributor for all of Sandisgarn, which is kind of cool. So they obviously have, the whole range of Sandisgarn yarn, hence why I also knit a lot with Sandisgarn because it's the most available to me locally. So this is the final product. I will put photos of what it looks like on me, and you might be able to tell if you've seen this pattern on the Petite Knit website or other people who have knitted it. This sweater is meant to be very oversized. The one biggest, not like critique per se, but the one biggest thing that I noticed from other folks knitting the sweater is that they mentioned how oversized it was, and I think everyone I saw who has knitted the sweater talked about how even more oversized, like they just didn't think it was gonna be that oversized, but it was very, very oversized. So I think that in my head maybe scared me a little, and so I decided to really go down a size, hence why I knitted the one for 8 to 9-year-olds. So I have the pattern in front of me and I'm referencing it on my laptop so I can get everything right. But the size guide for the 8 to 9-year-old in the junior size corresponds to an 88 centimeter chest circumference of the finished sweater. Now my chest circumference is about like 80, if that. Maybe it's like 80, no, it's like probably like 83, 82 to 83. So in my head, I did not want this sweater to be oversized. I did want the sweater to fit closer to maybe not as negative ease as it looks on the pictures, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I did want it to be significantly smaller than what I saw the smallest size in the women's size pattern was going to be. So that's why I decided to purchase the junior pattern instead, because I knew that I just wouldn't need to knit the largest size in the junior. I'd probably knit like the second or third largest size in the junior, and that way I could also, reuse this pattern for like the children in my life, give it as gifts and things like that, and I would only have to purchase one pattern. So that's mainly why I decided to purchase the junior pattern. Now I'm petite, I'm 5 feet tall, 100 pounds, so do with that what you will. Like, I think when you're looking at sweater patterns, the biggest thing for me is just to make sure that the measurements of the final piece are what you want, because a lot of petite knit clothing items are meant to be very oversized, but if you're not used to wearing something really oversized, then I wouldn't go with her recommended sizes. I would just look at what the finished product size is meant to be and decide using that how you want the garment to fit. That's my opinion. Maybe, other people don't want to do that, but that's how I tend to pick sizes of clothing. So that's why I did this. And so, like I said, the 8 to 9 years corresponded to an 88 centimeter chest and a 50 centimeter length, which would have been perfect for me. And the gauge is 20 stitches by 28 rows in a 10 by 10 block. Now, I did not use the same yarn that she recommends. Her technical yarn that she uses in the junior pattern is actually Pure Gint by Sandnes Garn. Now, I'm not sure if there's a huge difference between the Pure Gint and Double Sunday. To me, at least online, it seems like the gauge is pretty similar. And maybe that's where I went wrong, because I just assumed because the gauge was similar that it was going to wash out similarly. And so I really thought the sweater was going to stretch out more than it ultimately did. That being said, I'll take you through each section and stuff like that. But ultimately, this sweater is still smaller than I wanted, even though I pretty much hit gauge on the chest. The chest is maybe 86 centimeters. However, the length is only 45 centimeters, and that really irked me because this is a pattern, like a charted sweater. And so I guess I could have added a section, but I would have had to kind of like completely do that by scratch. And so I had to kind of knit it to the length that was set in the pattern and just pray that that length was going to block out to what I wanted it to be. And it did not. So it was kind of weird because I hit gauge, horizontally, but didn't vertically. And again, if it was a normal sweater, I could just keep adding rows to make it the length that I wanted. But because it was patterned like this, I wasn't able to do that. So I was a little irked by that. However, I can't be too mad because I did not gauge swatch. She recommends to gauge swatch with all the sections of the pattern, and I just didn't do that. And either way, because I had chosen this size, like it wouldn't have made a difference anyways, I guess. Or maybe I just would have done the size up. So that's on me a little bit, but it is kind of weird that I hit gauge on every other aspect of the sweater except for length. And so, like I said in the picture, you'll be able to see it's like quite cropped, maybe a little more cropped than I would prefer. So anyway, so those are kind of like my thought process behind picking a size and things like that. So if you want to knit this sweater, but you don't want a super oversized look, I would recommend looking at the junior size and see if there's a size in there that might work better for you. Like I said, did the 8 to 9 size. She goes from 9 to 10, 10 to 12, 12 to 14. So there are 3 extra sizes up that I could knit this in. To me, from what I can see from the pattern, the 12 to 14 years, which is the largest size in the junior, corresponds to the smallest size in the women's, which I think is extra, extra small. At least the finished garment measurements match up in that way. So, if you were planning to knit that smallest size anyways, and maybe want to knit a future one for a child in your life, your kid, then maybe I would just get the junior version, because then you have a wider range of options. Does that make sense? Anyways, so that's one thing I do like about petite knit, is that a lot of her popular patterns she has in junior sizes. So for someone petite like me who wants maybe a slightly smaller fit, I can go for the junior size rather than have to knit the women's size and have it be really oversized. All right, so let's get into the actual construction of this piece. So the way it's constructed is very similar to the cloud blouse or the cloud sweater. I think it follows a lot of the same construction that petite knit uses, which is you first knit the back panel flat, then you pick up from the shoulder and do German short rows and build out the shoulder, and then you knit the front panel and then you join in the round. And then lastly, you pick up the sleeves from the shoulder. So the way that it's constructed gives it kind of this drop shoulder effect. You can see this is basically essentially where you pick up for the shoulder is right here, and it's kind of dropped like that. I do think this gives the sweater a better back construction. Like I think the back looks nicer, like with the short row shaping For example, like I've done the Monday sweater and that's knitted completely in the round with short row shaping, but I do still think this kind of back panel construction makes it fit just a little bit better. So I did enjoy that part. And then you kind of finish off the neckline at the end. So the neckline is kind of the raw edge at the beginning. So this mainly has 3 sections. First one is this double moss stitch. It looks absolutely beautiful. I love this stitch so much in this color. I think it looks fantastic. Then you have this eyelet detail row right here. And then it goes into this beautiful kind of like cross faux cable section. And then it's a 2x2 rib section. And then those are kind of the repeats. From what I can see in the photos, the biggest difference between the junior and the women's version is just this one only has 1 repeat of this kind of faux cable, whereas the women's I think has 1 extra section of each of these, hence why it's like a lot bigger. So yeah, so those are kind of the 3, but I believe the sections are still the same. They're just the repeat numbers are different, if that makes sense. And like I said, this is a faux cable section, so you actually don't have any cabling at all whatsoever. This entire sweater is constructed with knit and purl patterns, which I thought was really intriguing. I have not done any cabling yet. I'm sure I will at some point, but currently I just haven't quite dipped my toe into that yet. And yet I still wanted a piece that looked a little more, what do I say, like a little more difficult to knit. So I feel like something like this just looks really impressive, even though you're kind of mainly just using knits and purls. So that's why I was attracted to the sweater in the first place. So those are all of the different panels. What else can I say? Okay, now I'll get to the most difficult part of this pattern, and that is the sleeves. The sleeves really did me in. I almost gave up because I was so frustrated with the sleeves. First off, usually when I am doing sleeves, I prefer to do magic loop method. I do have shorties and sometimes I'll use shorties, but they kind of give me a hand cramp. So for most sweaters, I actually usually use the magic loop technique. However, with this, because the pattern kind of continues onto the sleeve, I knew that I wanted to use shorties and knit in the round. That way I wouldn't have to kind of like compensate for just like the magic loop. I was just not as confident in my magic loop technique. So I would say, unless you're super confident in magic loop, I would maybe purchase some shorties if you're thinking of doing the sleeve. It definitely made it a lot easier. Even though it gave me a few hand cramps here and there, I definitely preferred knitting it on shorties. So that's number 1 for the sleeve. Number 2, the way Petite Knit has you do the decreases in the sleeve is very confusing, and I'm not quite sure why, honestly. I think she makes it like more confusing than it has to be. So for her, the only way I can describe it is her instructions have you decrease every 8 rounds, and then you kind of have to follow it according to the chart. Now, I tried doing this, and I also go to a knitting group every Thursday, and there are some very experienced knitters in that group, and even they were perplexed as to why it says to do that, because there is absolutely no way that you can continue with the pattern and do the decreases the correct way. And I know that because I tried it, and it just looks awful, and I don't know why she does that. Maybe I just didn't know how to do it, but any sort of advice that I saw online to the Ingrid, a lot of people were frustrated by the decreases in the sleeves and were confused by it. And so one solution I saw that I ended up doing is just doing the decreases in rows that made sense. So instead of doing the decreases in the pattern, you can see that there are some rows where it's just purls. So for example, these 2 rows, it's 2 rows of purling. So I ended up hiding a decrease in there. You can also see here, there's like a whole row of just knits. So I did one in there, and so on and so forth. So I just did some preliminary mapping out of where I needed to decrease in those rows to make sure that I had the right number of stitches when I got to the next section. So I hope that makes sense. It does require you to do a little bit of reworking of the math, but I think that is so much easier than trying to do the decreases otherwise, because truly I don't understand how you would have done them. And kudos to anyone who was able to figure it out based on her pattern. I find that kind of like weird because usually I find petite knit patterns to be super meticulous and really well written and clear, but the sleeves were just a whole other beast. And I just think she could have simplified it by just having you do the decreases in sections where, you know, it doesn't really have the pattern. And I think the decreases look fine. Like the sleeve looks totally normal. You really only decrease 3 or 4 times. So that's really only like 6 to 8 stitches. So the other alternative is you could just not decrease at all and just knit the entire sleeves. Cause I mean, it almost looks like it's the same width. Like it really doesn't even look like I decreased at all. So that was my backup. If this hadn't worked, I would have refrogged again and done just no decreases, but it ended up working. And the only part that maybe seems a little off is you can see this diamond pattern right here is kind of where I don't know, like where the pattern kind of mismatches, but this is actually at the bottom of the sleeve, so you can't tell at all. And you know, the part that's visible looks just fine. And same with this side, like I think it looks really good, and except for that small detail, but again, you can't really tell. So that was definitely the most frustrating part of this sweater for me. And again, I would just recommend doing the decreases like I said. I think it turned out fine. And yeah, so one last note on the size. Again, I'm really not sure where I went wrong. Like maybe the double Sunday just doesn't stretch out as much as the pure Gint. So I was kind of trusting the pattern a little more, even though it wasn't going to grow as much. That being said, I would totally knit this pattern again, and I think I will definitely knit up a size. I will still wear this sweater because it just has a different look. It's like a more tighter cropped look, so I think it just gives off a different vibe, but I would totally knit this again in a larger size so that it's not quite oversized, but it just is like, you know, a more wintry sweater vibe. The other thing I will note too that I just thought of right now is because the eyelet pattern, at least for this specific size, goes right at my chest. So when you're wearing it, I think also because again, this is a smaller size, so it's stretching over my chest instead of kind of falling over it, you can really see everything underneath the eyelet. So if you're just wearing a bra, you know, it's going to be whatever your bra, like you'll be able to see it. For me, I'll probably just wear a tank top underneath, but I don't have any red tank tops. So, you know, it'll just look a little odd. Like you can see in the photo, it's not like super, super obvious, but that's definitely something to consider. And I think because in the way it's supposed to be knitted, if you look at all of her pictures online, because hers is so much more oversized, I think the eyelets just end up kind of floating around. So it's not quite as tight on your body, and so it's not as obvious that it's see-through. But that is something to note. Like if you are planning on knitting this, like the eyelets are pretty big, so they will be see-through to a certain extent. Like you can really, you know, see through them like that. And I don't think there's any way around that. I think that's just, you know, a part of the pattern. So yeah, I think now that I've done one of her sweaters that are like this, I might try out doing the Storm sweater. I think that's the other one that she has that's similar to this, where it's sectioned and has different motifs done in knits and purls as well. So if you have done that sweater, let me know your thoughts down below. If you've done both of those, like both this and the Storm, let me know which one you'd prefer. I'm really interested because I think that one would be a fun sweater to do next. Moving on to my 2 whips. I am out of breath today. The first one is I did end up casting on the Monday sweater with my Mayak yarn. Mayak, I think it's Mayak yarn that I talked about in my last podcast. That was an acquisition that I made during our trip to Switzerland. I believe I purchased it at the yarn shop in Lugano, and it was actually on sale that day. So this is the Mayak Fiocco di Cashmere, or the 100% Tibetan cashmere yarn in the color Under the Tree. It's this beautiful kind of almost yellowy, mossy green color, and I believe she had 6 or 7 balls of this, which I think is perfectly enough for me to make a sweater, potentially even enough left over to make like a little Sophie scarf. We'll see. I did do a gauge swatch on this because Mayak doesn't give a gauge. They actually just tell you what needles to use. with this, but this is a DK weight yarn, and I'm knitting the Monday sweater on 3.5 millimeter needles, which is down half a millimeter from the recommended needle from Petite Knit. This is my second Monday sweater, so I'm pretty familiar with the construction, and I kind of just wanted an easy sweater to have on the needles. And so for me, that's like the typical Monday sweater because it's all constructed in the round, and there's some German short row shaping for the neckline, but other than that, it's a pretty vanilla raglan sweater. So this is what it looks like from the front. I am still on the raglan section where I'm increasing at all four. And then once you're done with that, you kind of increase just at the front or just at the body, I think, or something like that. And then, you know, you go to stockinette island on the body and then do the sleeves. It's a very vanilla sweater. I like the one that I knit a lot in the Sandisgarn superwash merino wool. So I'm excited to see what the cashmere is going to look like. I really love cashmere. I have almost no sensitivity to cashmere, so I'm excited to have like a fully knitted cashmere piece. And this yarn is really a joy to work with. It's super bouncy, it's obviously super soft, and I just love the color. So this has kind of just been my side project because the next whip I'm going to talk about is one that I am actively working on. This is a very exciting whip for me because this is the first time that I am doing a test knit. I got selected to do a test knit after applying with Casual Knits Studio on Instagram. I'll link her Instagram down below. But she is a pattern designer, knitter on Instagram, and I just followed her. I probably just, you know, had her suggested to me, and she had a pattern release that she was planning for the all fall sweater, and I just thought it looked so elegant in her photos. It looked so pretty. Even the yarn color she chose was something super up my alley, and I actually just kind of bookmarked it in my head to be like, oh, okay, once this releases, I'm definitely going to purchase it and try to knit it. It has this really cool shoulder detail. I'll put a picture here so you can kind of see what it looks like. So I was just really excited about it, and then I saw on Instagram that she was actually looking for test knitters, and I thought that would be a great opportunity to get, you know, access to this pattern early so I could have it knitted kind of ready for fall and winter. And I applied, you know, thinking maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't. There weren't a ton of requirements. It was kind of just like that you had like a public Instagram handle, and you kind of just fill out details of like your level and other things like that. So for me, even though I would say I'm an intermediate knitter, I have never done a test knit before, so I wasn't sure if she would want someone who's never done a test knit before. But I just hear lots of great things from people who've done them, and I have to say I've really enjoyed the process. I'm not going to talk about the pattern itself too much because obviously it still needs to be tested and knit and like published, but I can show you currently what I'm on. It is actually knitted from the bottom up, so you can see I have the bottom ribbing all done, and I'm done with the main body, and now I have split for the kind of like the shoulder and the sleeve, so you kind of knit it going up. I thought that was really interesting because I've never knitted a sweater or garment really bottom up, except the very first tank top I knitted, and at that point, like, I didn't even know anything about construction, so technically I just count it as like I've never really done a piece from the bottom up. So that has been interesting. And one thing I'll also share about the pattern, which I don't think is giving away too much, is that it is available in a flat or round version. So she has those for people who like to knit flat and then seam together clothing versus those who knit in the round. So I thought that was really cool because it's more inclusive to people who like the construction of, you know, different options basically. I'm an in the round knitter, so I have done it in the round, but even in our test knit group, there are a few folks who prefer to knit flat, so they are knitting flat, which I think is really cool. So yeah, the test knitting process has been really fun. We're really interactive on the Instagram group chat. I have like found a lot of cool knitters who I didn't know on Instagram, so I followed everyone. It's just been really fun to see everyone's progress. And it's been really fun to see also what yarn everyone is choosing, because not everyone is doing the suggested yarn. That's kind of the point. Like, you want to test knit with different yarns and sizes and things to make sure that it obviously works for different yarns. So of course we had to gauge swatch and post that and make sure it was all good to go before we started. And so the yarn that I decided to use is another double Sunday because I just loved knitting with it for the Ingrid sweater. This is Santa's Garden Double Sunday in the color, I think it's just called taupe, but for mine it only lists the number, so it's 2351, but I'm pretty sure it's taupe online. But yeah, so it's a great yarn. It's a, let me see, 100% merino wool, not superwash. And the gauge is 21 to 20 stitches with 3.5 to 4 millimeter needles. So I am knitting this up with 4 millimeter needles, and I hit gauge, obviously, or else I wouldn't have been able to start knitting with this. But yeah, I just thought this like a really cool color. It's very similar to the one that she has, which is why I wanted to do this sweater in the first place, because I wanted this kind of like taupey gray color. I just think it looks really great for fall and winter. So yeah, I'm really excited, and I can't wait to share more details on it. I'm sure once the pattern is officially published, she'll allow people to like post about it and talk more in depth about the construction and things like that. So I'm really excited to share that with you all. And I've been enjoying this process immensely. It's been really fun. Now in this last section, I'm actually going to do a little unpackaging, just covering up my address here. I actually won a giveaway on Instagram. I don't usually win giveaways. I don't like enter a ton of giveaways, but I do here and there. And the Instagrammer Alicia Plummer, she's a knitter on Instagram as well. And I think she's also a pattern designer, and she's on Ravelry, everything like that. She had a giveaway of her sock pattern and also sock yarn. I think she was like collaborating with a sock, like a yarn producer to do that. And I entered like just being hopeful, obviously, but I don't expect to ever win because I never win, but I ended up getting picked to receive the sock yarn. So I'm really excited. So I'm gonna open up this package with you all. I kind of remember what the yarn looked like, but honestly not really, and this has like been a while since I got this package. I just haven't really opened it because I wanted to kind of do it with you all on camera. Oh, it's so pretty. Okay, so that's what it looks like inside. Oh my goodness, this is so pretty. Okay, so this is from Farmer's Daughter Fibers. And I think I'm assuming it's from Great Falls, Montana, because that's what it says, unless, yeah, okay. So I think they produce from Great Falls, Montana. This says it is, okay, so this says July 2024. I'm assuming that's when it was dyed. Sock Squad, Bighorn Sock. It is 75% micron, hold on. 75% micron merino, 25% nylon. Yeah, so 75%, 19.5 micron SW merino. I don't know what all those things mean, but I'm assuming it's merino wool, and 25% nylon. And this skein comes with 463 yards in 100 grams. And then the mini is in the color I Ride My Bike, I Roller Skate In. Oh, is it? That's like that song, right? Like the song that was in Juno, I think, right? Okay. Anyways, and so the mini is 92 yards in 20 grams. So yeah, really fun. I entered because I just liked the color. I remember now. It's like this kind of beautiful blue. What do you call this? It's not like variegated, melange or like marbled. I don't know what to call this, where it has kind of like almost like speckled. It has different darker patches in it, which I think looks really cool. And yeah, I just entered because I have never knitted socks before. To be honest, I wasn't like super interested in knitting socks, and so for me, I was kind of like, okay, well, if I win yarn for free to like do it, that'll probably motivate me to do it, because now I have this yarn and it's like, what else are you gonna knit with this? I guess you could like hold it double and knit a sweater, but again, I don't obviously have enough to knit a sweater, but this is definitely enough to knit a pair of socks. So I think I might try it and try knitting a pair of socks. I just feel like as a knitter, maybe it's like a rite of passage, like you just have to knit a pair of socks at some point. So yeah, and there are people in my knitting group that love knitting socks. So I'm actually gonna bring this the next time I go in and see what their suggestion is, if they have like a good sock pattern that I could try as a beginner or something like that. I'm not quite sure what the mini skein can be used for. Maybe it's like if you wanted to do like a stripe or a pattern or do like a toe and a heel in a different color. Maybe I think that maybe is what it's for. So, you know, I obviously want to use up both. So I think maybe I'll do that. Like I'll have like the toe and the heel in this lighter color and then the body in this beautiful blue color. But I'm just so excited and it looks so pretty. And yeah, I'm just love this. So I'll definitely share with you all if I end up casting on for some socks, but very cool. Alrighty, so that is it for this lengthy podcast episode. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope the Ingrid Sweater section was informative in case you are knitting it. Please let me know what you're working on down below. I always love discovering new patterns and hearing back from you all. And I will see you in my next podcast episode. Bye.